In 2022, I was working in Japan as a caregiver. I was 30 years old at the time. Before that, I had worked as a machinist in Nagano Prefecture. The place was surrounded by trees, peaceful, quiet. I was so close to nature there, and I loved every single day of it, except for winter. Winter was hard. I didn't have a car, you see, and as a foreigner, getting a driver's license in Japan is incredibly difficult. So for all 7 years in Nagano, I rode my trusted bicycle. Through rain, through snow, through everything. A lot happened at my old company, things I'd rather not get into. In order to protect their credibility and name, let's just say I chose to get a new job, a new career, a new workplace, a new environment. That's how I ended up in Kyoto City. I worked there as a caregiver for 3 years. When I first arrived, the management put me in an old caregiving facility. They said it was just temporary until they registered my name with the municipality in that prefecture. It was no problem for me. The utilities were free. The rent was free. And besides, I specifically asked them if I could live there because it was only a 5-minute walk from my work. The old facility was massive. At least 30 rooms. All empty. All vacant. When I first went inside, I could smell it. The old scent of wood and old dust, thick in the air. As long as it wasn't too hard to breathe, I could bear with it. I always thought it was better in that old facility. At least I didn't have to pay anything. At least I could save money. My first year was peaceful, quiet, since I lived alone in that big white building. But because it was old and mostly abandoned, most of the lights were busted, and the others were constantly flickering. Imagine you're in a hospital hallway. Most of the lights are off. Some are just flickering. That constant buzzing sound, that strobing effect in the darkness. Yes, basically the ideal place for a horror movie. I'm not easily scared. Besides, I love watching horror movies. I've been reading horror books since I was a kid. I can handle it, I always thought to myself. It's better here than living in an apartment outside that would take most of my salary. After 2 years of living there, the most terrifying events of my life began. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was sleeping in my room after cleaning the building. Yes, even though the building was abandoned, and the CEO of the company told me I didn't have to clean the whole building, just my room was enough. But I insisted on cleaning it, just to get rid of that dusty smell around me. So on that day, I was exhausted. I planned to just take a power nap in the afternoon, but I didn't notice that I slept until night. And because of that, I didn't turn on the lights. Basically, the entire building was pitch black. When I opened my eyes, half awake, my hand was just blindly searching for my phone to look at the time. Then my hand poked the screen. It made a small, dim light that covered my entire room, just a little bit, enough that I could see some of my clothes hanging on the wall. In my half-asleep state, I noticed something in the corner of my room. An unfamiliar piece of clothing. I thought at first it was just clothes I had carelessly hung in the corner, but I'm sure there's no nail or hook there. I can't hang my clothes there. When I looked at it properly, I could slowly see a red, long-sleeved checkered polo shirt. I never once had that kind of shirt. With curious eyes, fully awake now, I scanned the shirt, from the center going down, and I could see the silhouette of long black pants. Going down further, I could clearly see feet. The figure was facing the wall. I could see its back. My first thought was an intruder, but when I looked at his face, yes, it was a man. I could clearly see his body build. Slightly curved back, hands in his pockets, but the face. Even though I couldn't see it clearly, I knew it had a damaged face. Slightly burned or something. Black residue on half of it. Its half face crushed or burned. I really couldn't see it properly because of the minimal light from the screen of my phone. At that time, my body still couldn't move from my position when I woke up, but my finger on my phone was rapidly tapping. Looking at that gruesome face in the corner of my room, I was terrified. What if the light from my phone cuts off? It might move. It might grab me. It might choke me. There was so much going on in my head in that moment. I was already sweating bullets at this point. I could literally hear my heart beating so loudly it might burst out. Then the figure slowly looked at me, and it slowly moved its head from left to right, faster and faster and faster. So fast that all I could see now was a blurry face, like on a crime scene when a reporter is interviewing someone, and they blur it for privacy purposes. His head was moving so fast, but his body wasn't even vibrating. The movements of his head didn't affect his body at all, and slowly I could hear a tinnitus, out of the blue. At first it was just a faint sound, I could barely hear it, but it slowly got louder and louder. At this point, all I could hear was my heart beating so loud, and the constant ringing in my ear. It kept getting louder and louder with every second, but then it suddenly stopped. All sounds, all background noises, even the sound of my heartbeat, but the man in the corner was still there. It still didn't move. But the most terrifying part of it all, the body started to tilt slightly, like it was going to fall, and it slowly continued to tilt toward me, like a statue about to fall over me. At this moment, I didn't know what to do. I knew I was still terrified. But it was like my mind and body were separate, and I couldn't control my body to move away. In a second, that figure tilted fully. It could hit me any moment. But before it hit me, I woke up, shouting, sweating bullets, gasping for air. I immediately looked around me, still gasping and terrified. I felt so drained. I was afraid I was still sleeping, so with no energy, I let my body fall from the bed, just to feel pain and wake myself up. Then my back hit the floor. That's when I realized I was awake now. I was so relieved. I realized it was all just a dream. A nightmare, everybody would say. I got up and went to the kitchen. It was still bright outside. I looked at my phone. I realized I had only been asleep for 30 minutes. While drinking water, I slightly smiled to myself and thought it was time to stop using horror narrations as white noise. Fast forward from that afternoon, everything went back to normal. Empty hallways, busted lights. There was a time I really wanted to change all the light bulbs. But that building was an old-style facility, and most old facilities have high ceilings, and I didn't have a ladder, so it is what it is. That's what I always thought. And then one quiet afternoon, I was in the laundry room, separating colored clothes from white before I put them in the washing machine. I heard knocking outside. At first, I thought it was just the neighbor doing a renovation or something, so I let it slide. The knocking continued. It stopped briefly from time to time, and then continued. I was in the living room at this point, bench scrolling on my phone. I could still hear faint knocking, like a hammer banging on wood. Through my earphones, after many hours of scrolling and watching movies on my phone, I realized it was almost dark already. So I turned on the lights, and I noticed the banging was still there, more likely because I was near the laundry room now. I could clearly hear the banging. I took off my earphones from my ears and stopped in the center of the dimmed hallway. I'm sure at this point in time no one was doing construction because I could see the neighbor's house from where I was standing, over the big sliding glass window, a typical Japanese house. At night with no lights, it would just have a light due to a light sensor. I could still hear the banging, but now it more resembled knocking. I scanned my surroundings, looking if I could find the source of the noise. That's when I saw it, a pair of feet, standing in front of my door. I didn't see the body, just feet with no slippers. I was so shocked. I shouted so loud and lost my balance, stumbled down, and when I hit my butt on the ground, I felt the pain and my brain processed it, and I knew I was awake. I wasn't asleep just like last time. And in that split moment, all the memories from the man in the corner flooded my memory, like a flash flood. In an instant, my heart began to pound so much, I recognized it as before. The sound of my heartbeat helped my memory remember all the details from that nightmare. I scrambled to my feet. My legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. The feet were still there, standing, not moving, just standing in front of my door. I wanted to run, but where would I go? This was my home. This was where I lived, so I did the only thing I could think of. I ran to my room, slammed the door, locked it, and I waited. The knocking started again, but this time it was on my door. Slow, deliberate. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 more knocks. Knock, 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 silence, knock, 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 silence, knock, knock. This continued for what felt like hours, but when I checked my phone, only 15 minutes had passed. I called my supervisor, told him I wasn't feeling well, that I needed to stay with a friend for a few days. He said it was fine, take all the time I needed. But even as I packed my bag, the knocking continued. I stayed at a manga cafe that night, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those feet, standing there, waiting. The next day, I went back during daylight to get more of my things. The building looked normal, peaceful even, sunlight streaming through the windows. I told myself I had imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, living alone in that big empty building for too long. But when I entered my room, I saw them. Footprints, dusty footprints, leading from my door, across my room, and stopping right beside my bed, where I sleep. The dust in this building was thick. These prints were fresh, from last night, but they only went one way, to my bed. There were no prints leaving. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my belongings. I didn't pack carefully, just threw everything into my bag and left. That night, I stayed at a cheap hotel, but I couldn't escape it. At exactly 3 a.m, I heard it, knocking on my hotel room door. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't answer, didn't move, just lay in bed, frozen. The knocking continued for 30 minutes straight. When it finally stopped, I heard footsteps in the hallway, walking back and forth in front of my door. In the morning, I asked the front desk if anyone had been on my floor last night. They checked the cameras. No one. The hallway was empty all night. I went to work that Monday, exhausted, terrified. I couldn't focus, kept checking over my shoulder. During lunch, my supervisor noticed, asked if I was okay. I broke down, told him everything. The nightmare, the feet, the knocking, the footprints. He listened, didn't judge, didn't laugh. Then he said, "Let me make some calls." By the end of the day, he had arranged for me to move to a small apartment near the city center, with other people around, with bright lights, with life. The company would cover the moving costs and help with the first month's rent. I was so relieved, I almost cried, but that night, before I could move out, I had to spend one last night in that old facility. I prepared myself, left all the lights on, played music, did anything to fill the silence, but at midnight the power went out. Complete darkness, complete silence, and then I heard it. Not knocking this time. Footsteps. Inside the building. Walking down the long hallway. Getting closer to my room. Slow, deliberate, barefoot steps on the wooden floor. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it at my door. The footsteps stopped. Right outside, the doorknob began to turn. I watched in horror as it twisted. Slowly, the lock was engaged, but the knob kept turning, as if whatever was outside didn't care about locks. Then it stopped. Silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Just watched that doorknob in the beam of my flashlight. Then the knocking started. But not on the door. On the walls, all around me. On every wall, on the ceiling, on the floor beneath my feet. Knock, 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 everywhere, all at once. The sound was deafening, like being inside a drum. I covered my ears, but I could still hear it, could still feel it, vibrating through my entire body. I screamed, begged it to stop, begged whatever it was to leave me alone, and suddenly it did stop. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I waited, listening, watching. Then I heard it, a whisper, right next to my ear. Stay. I didn't stay. I ran, grabbed my bag and ran out of that building, into the night. Didn't care where I was going, just ran. I slept in a 24-hour convenience store that night. The staff didn't mind. They saw the terror on my face. Let me sit in a corner, under the bright fluorescent lights. The next morning, my supervisor came to pick me up, helped me move my remaining belongings. He didn't ask what happened, just help me get out of there. I moved into my new apartment that day. Small, but bright, with neighbors on both sides. I could hear them. Normal sounds. Cooking, talking, living. It felt safe. But even now, months later, I still hear it sometimes. Late at night, when everything is quiet, faint knocking, so faint I can't tell if it's real or just in my head. It makes me afraid to listen. Afraid to acknowledge it, because I learned something in that old facility. Some things exist in the spaces between our world and somewhere else, and when you acknowledge them, when you hear them, they can reach you. But here's the thing, life goes on. I continued working, continued living, tried to forget, and then I met her, EMI. She worked for the same company, different branch, different department. But we met at a company training seminar about 6 months after I moved. She was beautiful, kind, patient. When I was quiet and withdrawn, she didn't push, just sat with me, talked to me, made me laugh. We started meeting for coffee after work. Then dinner, then weekend walks through Kyoto's temples and gardens. She never asked why I sometimes stopped mid-conversation. When I heard a sound that reminded me of knocking, she just waited, held my hand, brought me back to the present. One evening, about a year after we started dating, we were having dinner at my apartment. I heard it, that faint knocking. My hands started shaking. The chopsticks fell from my fingers. Emmy noticed immediately. She reached across the table, took my hands in hers. "It's okay," she said softly. "I'm here." And something about those words, her voice, her presence. The knocking stopped. For the first time in over a year, when I heard that sound, it stopped. That night I told her everything. About the old facility, the man in the corner, the feet, the knocking, the whisper. She listened to every word, didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't question my sanity. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Some doors close, but new ones open. Maybe the knocking you hear now isn't from the past. Maybe it's the future, asking you to let it in." I had never thought of it that way. A few months later, I proposed to her in a small garden near Kiyomizu Temple during cherry blossom season. She said yes. We got engaged last spring. We're planning a small wedding, just family and close friends. She gave me something I thought I'd lost in that old facility: peace, hope, a future. And you know what? I still hear the knocking sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone. But now, when I hear it, I think of her words. Maybe it's not something trying to get in. Maybe it's life, opportunity, the future, knocking, asking me to answer, asking me to open the door. I'm 34 now, living in Kyoto, engaged to a beautiful woman who makes me laugh, who holds my hand when I'm afraid, who reminds me that not all darkness is evil. Sometimes it's just the absence of light, and light can always be found if you're brave enough to look for it. The old facility is still there. I drive past it sometimes. It looks abandoned, windows dark, probably will be torn down eventually. I don't stop, don't look too long, just keep driving, because some chapters of your life need to end, some doors need to stay closed, but others are just beginning to open. And when I hear knocking now, when that faint sound reaches my ears in the quiet hours, I don't freeze in terror anymore. I reach over, touch Emmy's hand beside me, feel her warmth, her life, her love, and I smile because I learned something else after that old facility, after the terror, after the darkness. Fear can follow you, haunt you, whisper in your ear. But love is louder. Love is the light you carry, even in the darkest hallways, even when all the bulbs are broken. It's the light that never flickers, never fades, and it's enough to keep the darkness at bay. So if you're out there in your own dark place, hearing your own knocking, afraid of what's waiting in the corners, remember this: the door can lead two ways, out of darkness or into light. You just have to choose which way to open it. I chose light. I chose Emmy. I chose life. And the knocking, it's still there. Probably always will be. But it doesn't own me anymore, because I finally understand. Every ending is just a door closing, and every knock is just the next chapter, asking to begin.